This is the ground where the world went mad. In the winter of 1914, this frozen mud was the stage for a new kind of industrial slaughter. The rules were simple. The men in that trench were your enemy. The men in this trench were your comrades. In between was no man's land, a place of death. But here, on this very ground, the rules were broken. The story of the Christmas Truce is famous. But what isn't famous is the story of what it cost the men who lived it. This isn't just a story of peace. This is the story of a secret war of morality that raged long after the guns fell silent. A war within. Most histories will tell you it started with the Germans singing Silent Night. But the truth is far more curious. In some sectors, an unspoken live and let live system had already emerged. But Christmas was different. The high command was worried. The men were losing their hatred. Why? Then the clues appeared. Not just singing, but shouted conversations. In perfect English, a German soldier yelled, "A happy Christmas to you, Englishmen." The British, suspicious, shouted back, "Same to you, Fritz." But why? The Germans' reply was a gut punch. Because today we have no quarrel with you. The desire for peace wasn't a feeling. It was a conscious decision. To understand the internal war, we must meet the men. First, Private Henry Williams, 19, a clerk from London. He carried a book of poetry, but his faith in the cause was cracking. For Henry, the truce would be a test of his soul. Then Gefreiter Karl Müller, 21, a carpenter from Saxony. His most prized possession was a photo of his infant daughter, whom he had never held. For Karl, this was a simple, human necessity. A chance to feel like a man again, not a weapon. And Lieutenant John Gordon, 29, a career officer, his duty was to fight and win. When he saw his men climbing out of the trenches, his first instinct was to order them back. But he didn't. His internal war was the most complex, the conflict between his orders and his duty to the men he led. And so, on Christmas morning, they met. Henry shook Karl's hand. Karl showed Henry the photo of his daughter. For a few hours, the madness stopped, but beneath the surface, the internal battles raged. Henry later wrote, "I laughed with him, a real, genuine laugh. And in that moment, I felt a traitor to my country and a friend to my enemy. I've never been more confused in my life. They played football. They shared rations. They were, for a few hours, what God intended them to be. But as dusk fell, a dreadful awareness settled in. Tomorrow was the 26th. Orders came down from the highest levels. Fraternization with the enemy is forbidden and will be dealt with as treason. The men were rotated out. The high command was terrified. They had lost control. They had seen that the common soldier would choose peace. Now imagine Henry, back on sentry duty. Is that Karl's trench? Is the man in his sights the one who gave him chocolate? Imagine Karl hearing the order to prepare for a raid. Would he have to throw a grenade into a trench where he knew men, not monsters, lived? The machine of war demanded they forget, but how could they? The Christmas Truce of 1914 was the last of its kind. In 1915, artillery was ordered to fire relentlessly on Christmas Eve to prevent any repetition. So, what became of our soldiers? Henry Williams was killed at the Somme in 1916. The entry from December 26, 1914, was the last in his diary filled with hope. Karl Müller survived the war, but his daughter later said he never spoke of it, except once, when he heard a Christmas carol and wept uncontrollably. Lieutenant John Gordon was decorated for bravery. In his memoir, he devoted a single, cryptic sentence to that day. The day we were, for a few hours, what God intended us to be, and have borne the shame of it ever since. The Christmas Truce was not a fairy tale. It was a rebellion of the human spirit, a fleeting victory for the war within every soldier, the war between the man who is taught to hate and the man who is born to connect. The men who participated were ordered to forget. They were scattered, silenced, but for one frozen moment the war within was won. And the memory of that victory, and the burden of it, is the true untold story of the men in the trenches. The war within is the hardest battle. Subscribe for more stories they never told you.